Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sunday matches for the Victory Road World Cup of Pokémon VGC, sponsored by Elgato, Gigi Tour, and Metafi. My name is Maple Rourke. I am filling in for Costa Dynamos today, and I am here with Yuki Zeninovich for the first time in a couple of weeks of casting. So, really psyched to be back on the mic with you, especially on such a pivotal day of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you said it totally right. It's a really pivotal, part of World Cup. I mean, it's the last week before, so many teams get eliminated and we go into the single elimination round. Really high stakes. We have some teams who, made it all the way last year who might get eliminated. And we have some teams who might not have even participated and are making top 16. It's all crazy. So it's really exciting to see this. And yeah, I'm just excited to cast this next match with you, Maeve.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, speaking of groups and teams not making it through, right? The group that we'll be bringing for this round between Peru and Italy is an absolutely insane group, right? Peru and Italy, who we're going to be showing in this round, both have already moved on, but in the process, they've also knocked out the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom being put in that really what was a tough rematch kind of group in comparison to their last year, and then Ecuador also being that last group to not make it through. We did see a match between Ecuador and the United Kingdom yesterday, which was definitely really interesting to watch. However, I think this one is going to be even more interesting because for these two teams right now, stakes are pretty important. Both of them are currently tied in points. Both have 6 points. Both have recorded 2-round wins. So whoever wins between this round today is going to be the one who is placed in that first seed. And, I know you and Kana spoke a little bit earlier about it in the broadcast, but if you are the first seed in your group, you're playing someone who is the second seed in another group. And, even though really every group that advances is really good, any sort of advantage you can gain is absolutely crucial, especially in a team tournament like this, and having the momentum to push you forward, especially, just as a team in that, the emotions of it is really nice as well.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. The last match we saw between Ryan and Benjamin were pretty high stakes because, it really depends on whether Canada can advance at all or not. In this case, that's not really the case. These two teams are advancing already, but it's more about the seeding, like you said, and that's become super important. Every detail counts. If you can get that one-up advantage of being a first seed instead of second seed, these teams are willing to take it. They're trying to take it all. So I'm just really excited to see this next match. This matchup between Peru and Italy. As you can see right here, Italy is up 4-0. So Peru, the best they can hope for is a tie if they win the next 4 remaining matches. Italy's certainly not going to make it easy for them. And if Gabriel drops this set, then they're officially going to be second seed while Italy takes the first seed, and it might get a little bit more complicated if Peru is able to basically come back with a reverse sweep and 4-0 to tie it up 4-4.
Yeah, I mean, it might, it's that really interesting thing, right, where I'm sure all of the rest of the Italian players are paying attention to this match, because as long as they win and they have this momentum going in, then they're guaranteed that first seed. Peru, I think even with a tie, I'm not entirely sure how, because I know currently Italy has more sets won over Peru just throughout this group stage, but not entirely sure how much that would change if there was a tie. So, I think it's going to be really interesting today, especially to kind of see how this ends up playing out. But you can see even with these teams, everything looks very, very standard, very on meta. Nothing here that kind of throws me for a bit of a loop, and that makes a lot of sense when you're at this kind of high stakes point of the competition. Peru was a team last year that I think, was almost took people by surprise with how good they were, but this year they were not getting slept on whatsoever. Italy placed second last year to Spain, so obviously as well that they're an incredibly talented group, an incredibly successful group of players. So there's a lot of really talented competition here, and I'm super excited to be able to break down the match for you guys between Emanuele, Ciliberto, and Gabriel Durán. So I think, as long as we can kind of get into that player breakdown, and I know you guys were able to see, especially as well, the teams that these players were bringing. Both teams are still very on meta. Not as much of the fun stuff that we were kind of able to look at yesterday, with some of the weirder things like the Alolan Executor that we got to see on stream. But both of these players are incredibly talented with a lot of really strong history between them.
Yeah, we can start off with talking about Gabriel from Peru. Started playing in 2018 and was a top 4 at the World Championships that year as a senior. Was a finalist in the special event in Lima 2019 and also in 2019 regional top 8 as well. Currently with a 3-1 record. So yeah, Peru, a team that just like has a lot more to prove. I think they're probably really hungry to just go farther, given that they barely just made it into the top cut last year, but just lost in the first round. I think now they know for sure that they want to just that they are going to be in the top cut this time. They want to just go farther. And yeah, getting first seed is going to help them with that. So excited to see how Gabriel will play to clinch that.
Yeah, and Emanuele Ciliberto as well, not a stranger to great results. Milan Specialist finalist this year, and any result in the current format is invaluable to a team, but also was part of the team that was the finalist last year to Spain. So, Italy has, not only do they have really talented players, but it does speak to their management as well, and kind of just the ability to work together as a team and kind of support the other people or even the team building. It's really it's a very different ball game to play in a team format versus, if you're traveling to Worlds this week, if for those of you who are currently not on a plane, you can build and prep with your friends, but even then you're still you're going in there, you're playing all 9 rounds on those days solo, maybe with some chats in between. But for these players, they're bringing 2 teams that I think we'll be seeing a lot of later in this week. Gabriel bringing the Zacian, Kyogre, Incineroar, Amoonguss, Grimmsnarl, and Thundurus, while Emanuele is bringing the Incineroar, Groudon, Lunala, Porygon 2, Venusaur, and Charizard. We've seen a lot of teams comprised of these Pokemon. Emanuele's team, oftentimes you see the Grimmsnarl over the Porygon 2, sometimes carrying that trick with Iron Ball or Lagging Tail. However, the Porygon 2 does provide a lot of great opportunities with Trick Room. We did see actually in a game a couple of weeks ago that I was able to commentate, there was the Lunala and the Porygon 2 led in the opener, and then they were forced to kind of call who was going to trick and who could taunt, or who was going to use Trick Room, and the Whimsicott on the opposite side had to go for a taunt. It was a really interesting 50-50.
Yeah, I mean, I think these adjustments are quite interesting on both of these teams. I'm not sure how much of an impact it's going to make. I'm not sure if, the Porygon 2 over on Emanuele's side, whether it's a Porygon 2 or whether it's a Grimmsnarl, the Porygon 2, not really that favored against Zacian and Kyogre, likes to come out against the Calyrex Shadow or maybe the Lunala kind of teams, since they just don't have, that many attacks that can go into it that effectively. And over on Gabriel's side, I think the Amoonguss might typically be a Pokemon like Rillaboom instead, but opting to go for the maybe even more support-heavy Pokemon in Amoonguss, but also doesn't really like facing down the Venusaur that it can't Spore, the Charizard that can hit it, knock it out in one hit. So I'm not sure if it's going to be that much of an influence, but we're going to go straight into Game 1 as Emanuele brings out the Lunala and Venusaur.
Both of those shinies look incredible on this stage, I am going to immediately say. While there is the Grimmsnarl and the Incineroar on the opposite side, so what looks like a pretty offensively heavy lead versus something that can kind of build a little bit more of a defensive strat. And if this Incineroar has something like Taunt, I think this might be the turn for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. On the other hand, Emanuele not wanting to get faked out and losing a turn might just go straight for the Dynamax. So curious to see how that interaction goes, whether the fake out happens or whether the Dynamax happens. But we see the Lunala switching out for the Incineroar, potentially expecting Gabriel to go for something like a Trick, Scary Face, Thunder Wave, something to mitigate the Lunala so that it becomes a little bit more manageable in the mid to late game.
Yeah, the Incineroar on Gabriel's side, going for the fake out into the Venusaur. However, Trick, like you said, goes into the Incineroar on Emanuele's side. That was that Lunala. Thanks to the Dark typing, though, that is not going to affect the opposing Incineroar. And now you've been able to at least time out the fake out. Whether or not your Venusaur is holding that Focus Sash is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I thought that was just a really, really clever turn from both players. So Gabriel expecting Emanuele not to go for the Dynamax since, the Grimmsnarl could very easily go for a Trick onto it and basically waste his Dynamax by making it slower and things like that, and yeah, just kind of trusting him. So still going for the fake out despite the risk of Dynamax, and the Lunala switching out for the Incineroar being really big, as we see the Sleep Powder connect right into the Grimmsnarl, really taking advantage of Gabriel's passive turn.
Yeah, and really I think you see Emanuele is prioritizing that Grimmsnarl as the bigger threat. The Incineroar on Gabriel's side goes for the parting shot into the Incineroar on Emanuele's side, and putting that Grimmsnarl to sleep I think really kind of allows for Emanuele, if he wants to send in his Lunala once more, to maybe be a little bit more comfortable, even in the face of possibly whoever is going to switch in here for Gabriel, and it looks like it's going to be that Zacian.
Yeah, I mean, just you can really tell how high, like just how high ranked both these players are, because you see the Venusaur take advantage of Gabriel's sort of passive turn, having two Pokemon that are more support roles. But on the other hand, Gabriel recognizing that, going for the parting shot immediately, and bring out the Zacian, which can't be hindered by the Incineroar's Intimidate since it's already on the field. But now it's going to be a question of, okay, is Emanuele's Venusaur, does it have the Life Orb, does it have the Weather Ball, so that quite easily the Incineroar could switch out for the Groudon, set up the Sun, make sure the Venusaur is faster than the Zacian, and go for a knockout. Especially with the Grimmsnarl sweep, very low probability that it can disrupt the Venusaur in this following turn.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even imagine, too, if Emanuele goes for something like that Gigantamax of the Venusaur, if he's carrying something like Earth Power and goes for a Max Quake, maybe tries to set up something like some special defense boost, still getting super effective damage off into something like the Zacian, and just kind of prep for that Kyogre that's sitting in the back, most likely, on Gabriel's team. As long as you've got maybe something like your own Groudon that comes in, you can even get more special defense boost for the Groudon. But, instead having this Dynamax, no switches this turn, means that this Incineroar is still going to be on the field. No speed boost yet, but showing a max guard for this Venusaur, trying to not take any damage from this Behemoth Blade coming out from the Zacian, and at least allowing at this point possibly for a parting shot from the Incineroar into the Zacian to drop that attack from that Intrepid Sword boost and allow for a nice pivot on Emanuele's side. This is still going to allow this Grimmsnarl to stay asleep most likely for this turn as well. It does have a chance to wake up, and I'm sure that Gabriel may be banking on it, because now would be a great time to trick something like a Lagging Tail, especially into that Venusaur slot. But Lunala now switching out for the Incineroar, gonna again provide some more pressure with items like Meteor Beam, but Grimmsnarl takes another turn of sleep.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite the crazy turn to me, because Emanuele just didn't go for the straight switch into Groudon, so but at the same time went for the parting shot into the Zacian. So that means that he predicted Gabriel to not protect the Zacian, respecting the Weather Ball or the Earth Power max move into it. So Emanuele just really read Gabriel perfectly that turn, and yeah, now we see the Incineroar come back right in with a great matchup against both the Zacian and the Grimmsnarl, and preventing that Zacian from being able to knock out the Venusaur in one hit, and possibly retaliating with a knockout.
Yeah, absolutely. Grimmsnarl takes another turn of sleep, which is definitely frustrating, trying to get off some of those prankster moves. Zacian going for the Behemoth Blade, though, will connect. No max guard on this turn, and no protect from the Zacian either. Targets into that Venusaur and does a pretty decent chunk of damage, but with those two Intimidates, or with the Intimidate and the Parting Shot, definitely weakened there. The G-Max Vine Lash into the Grimmsnarl does does a really nice amount of damage there, and most importantly, it's going to start setting up this residual damage for the Pokemon on Gabriel's side later on in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the residual damage is quite important, but at the same time, I think Emanuele is not in the best position, since the Kyogre is still probably in the back for Gabriel and still has yet to Dynamax, and I don't really see that many Pokemon on Emanuele's side that can take attacks from the Kyogre so well. Even if Groudon's able to get up the Sun, the max moves of Kyogre are able to reset that, and I don't think Emanuele has any Pokemon that can hit the Kyogre for super effective damage other than Venusaur, so I think Gabriel just needs to focus down this Venusaur, and as soon as that's gone, then I think a Kyogre Dynamax could really wrap up the game for Gabriel.
Yeah, I mean, unless you may have to try and muscle through it with that Lunala, maybe just try and go for some Moongeist Beams. But, like you said, that means that the Kyogre is going to be what is that Dynamax option, right? Incineroar does have full HP, but the Kyogre is a way better fit, and Grimmsnarl, although should be waking up this turn, is a Pokemon that isn't exactly too healthy at the moment. Max Guard from the Venusaur, though, pretty understandable play here, trying to not take anything from this Grimmsnarl, who again takes a turn of sleep. Incineroar going for the Parting Shot onto the Incineroar that has just switched in for Gabriel, and going to be once again changing up the positions on Emanuele's side.
Yeah, we've seen so much hesitation from Emanuele to bring out the Groudon, just not wanting to get caught in an off position where, let's say one of Gabriel's Pokemon gets knocked out by a Venusaur's max move, and then all of a sudden you see a Kyogre come in with the Groudon already on the field, and the rain taking over, and then just being able to just go for double knockouts easily. So I think that's a pretty good heads-up play from Emanuele, but I think at the cost of that, he just really was not able to get that much mileage out of his Gigantamax turns. Yes, he got the vines up, but like we just both talked about, I think Venusaur is really the only answer to Gabriel's Kyogre. So with that Venusaur at that kind of health, I'm not really sure what Emanuele can do to stave off this max Kyogre coming out inevitably from Gabriel.
Yeah, and at this point too, right, most Venusaurs are not typically running Protect, so you do have a pretty free fake out into that Venusaur slot, allowing this Lunala to move slower. However, if you're not going for that fake out slot, you could go for some sort of dark type move into the Lunala, break the Shadow Shield, and then allow maybe for your Pokemon that are faster in the back to continue to come in and just kind of get that pretty clean wrap up there. Groudon in the back, like you said, is going to be something that's going to allow this Venusaur to move faster if that's the chance, but instead it's the Incineroar once more. Both of the Incineroars on both trainer sides have been switching in and out constantly, just consistently getting fake out pressure. You know, if this Grimmsnarl was really focused on getting some strong physical attacks down, it would not be doing too much damage. Sleep Powder does not connect onto the Incineroar, though it was able to go for a parting shot onto the Venusaur slot, once again switching this Incineroar out for Gabriel and not getting put to sleep in a very crucial way.
Yeah, and with the switch in, I'm sure that the Zacian is probably going to come in because Gabriel has the same mindset of, okay, I'm not going to bring out my Kyogre until Emanuele brings his Groudon in. So it's kind of a chicken race happening here. And I think, like I said before, Gabriel is definitely favored, especially with this Grimmsnarl finally waking up, getting that Spirit Break out onto the Venusaur for good measure, and likely going down to the Vines this turn. And really curious to see if Gabriel is finally going to, defect and say, okay, I'm going to bring out the Kyogre now finally, or, continue to go for the more patient route and bring in the Incineroar.
Yeah, and I mean that Venusaur, right, taking that Spirit Break, at least you get that extra special attack drop, right? You maybe had only done maybe 8 points of HP damage there at best, but you're at least getting another drop on that special attack, which is going to force this Venusaur to want to switch out, and in order to maybe bring it back in a way that it's comfortable, you'd have to lose another Pokemon on the team, because really if you try and switch it into anything else on the team on Gabriel's side, it can most likely get knocked out, either be that from a Behemoth Blade or even like a Max Hailstorm from that Kyogre, and then really Flare Blitz from an Incineroar is comfortably dealing with this Venusaur at almost any point, along with still having that fake out pressure this turn as well. So, having these Incineroar just kind of be able to move so freely across the field for both trainers, I think is partially what's keeping them so cautious about sending in their big weather support Pokemon that you typically can see paired early with a Pokemon like Venusaur in this game, especially because it would love to sit in front of a Zacian. However, it's not really getting the chance. Venusaur, though, is going to withdraw this turn after taking all of those special attack drops, brings out the Lunala, still at full HP, so any damage it takes this turn is going to be alright, because it can handle it with that Shadow Shield. Fake out into the Zacian, though, a great way to stop anything like a Behemoth Blade coming out. And then the Incineroar going for the fake out onto the Lunala, not going to work because it's a Ghost type.
Yeah, I mean, excellent play from Emanuele, kind of expecting or basically reading Gabriel to go for the fake out into that slot instead of the Behemoth Blade, which he also very much could have gone for. So a pretty high risk, maneuver from Emanuele, but really paying off for him. Now I think he can quite safely go for a Trick Room option to better deal with that Kyogre potentially. I think we still haven't fully seen Incineroar on Gabriel's end moveset, so possible it has a Throat Chop or Darkest Lariat, so that it can still, hit the Lunala for pretty super effective damage. But overall, Emanuele still also has the option for going for the Meteor Beam to knock it out before Gabriel has the opportunity to do anything like that, and then also retaliate with his own Flare Blitz into Zacian. So, I think he's definitely doing the best he can in the situation that he's in, but I think Gabriel's Kyogre still a threat in the back.
Yeah, and Zacian is consistently always a threat. Going for a Behemoth Blade into the Lunala, breaking that Shadow Shield, does a pretty good chunk of damage even through there. Lunala charging up that Meteor Beam, though, going before either of these Incineroars. If it's able to hit this Incineroar on Gabriel's side of the field with this +1 special attack Meteor Beam, then I think Emanuele is going to be in a good position, because that gets rid of something that is a pretty big threat. The Meteor Beam does connect as well. Going to be doing that super effective Rock-type damage onto the Incineroar. A very easy knockout there. And now you get something that has been a bit of a nuisance off of Gabriel's side of the field, and is forcing him into bringing that Kyogre. And while Kyogre is one of the last 2 Pokemon on the field, you have the opportunity to get a little bit more weather control once it's all set with its Dynamax turns. Incineroar's parting shot into that Zacian as well, continuing to lower that attack and allow for it to come back in later, now that the Zacian cannot switch around.
Yeah, exactly. And even with the Kyogre threat in the back, I'd say, the only way Emanuele could have, kind of turned the tide back was to just out Pokemon Gabriel with the count. So currently he has 4 Pokemon left, while Gabriel only has the 2, the Kyogre and the Zacian. And yeah, the Kyogre no longer able to switch out. So other than any max geysers, the weather, would stay as sun. So yeah, despite that, Pokemon advantage that Emanuele has, Gabriel still has 2 of his restricted Pokemon with Dynamax still as an option. So I'm super curious to see if, Gabriel is still able to win and push through this Pokemon disadvantage that he currently has, or whether Emanuele can just eke it out by, maybe getting a cheeky knockout on Zacian this turn by finally bringing the Groudon and making the Venusaur faster for 1 turn before it gets knocked out.
Yeah, or even do you try and go for something like a sleep powder, right? You may have gotten that Meteor Beam boost, but is getting the Lunala out and getting a sleep powder on the Kyogre a better option, because then you stall out that Dynamax even more. As long as that Pokemon, even if it goes for the Dynamax, then you are at least getting rid of 1 of its turns. However, Venusaur switches out here, brings in the Incineroar once again. Another Intimidate from this Incineroar. It is switched out, I think, probably almost at least every other turn. However, here is the disconnect. We were warned about this prior, and although this disconnect, the game is currently in Emanuele's favor, the disconnect was on his side. So this game will be in going in for Gabriel on this turn. As the animations play out on this final turn, we'll kind of begin to get that wrap up here.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, quite unfortunate that these kind of disconnects happen. We still see the animations go on for this turn as if the match is going on normally, but we see the disconnect happen. So I think we'll just be seeing some flashy Dynamax animations of Kyogre, and we can still see what happens. We see the Zacian go for the Behemoth Blade, potentially into the Venusaur slot, but we see that it goes into Lunala instead, being scared of a Trick Room potentially, and we see it go straight for the Moongeist Beam to knock out the Zacian.
Yeah, and if you're either of these players, right, and now you understand that this disconnect has happened, of course the first thing you do want to check, of course, is who disconnected, but beyond that is now you have to take the time to think onto that next game, because they didn't end up seeing that end game. Gabriel was not able to confirm if it was that Kyogre in the back, although I think we have a 99% positive assumption that it was. You have to go into your next game and think about maybe seeing how Gabriel played that end game. Gives you at least a little bit more time to kind of judge what your game 2 plan is going to be. If you're Emanuele, you say, well, I know I have the tools to beat Gabriel's team, and I know it's there as long as I can, as long as there are no more connection issues throughout the rest of the games, right? I know what my game plan is. I've gotten a lot of good information on the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. You can see how hesitant Gabriel is to bring that Kyogre onto the field, just the same way that Emanuele was hesitant to bring his own Groudon. So if that forces you maybe into going for something that may be a little bit more of an aggressive anti-Kyogre lead and try and force that last restricted to stay in the back, then that's something that I think Emanuele may have to focus on. Whereas for Gabriel, you did get the win there, but it was still at the cost of giving up a lot of information, and also in a way that, doesn't always feel like the best of cases to win. So I think maybe if you're Gabriel, or sorry, if you're Gabriel, you have to think of a little bit of a different game plan. Maybe say, if there's a way that I can stop this Incineroar from moving around first, because it really does just hinder the Zacian as the game goes on, and that Zacian does not have the same mobility it may have had at the start of the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think these players need to adjust, like you said, but I think it's quite interesting because, yeah, like we have one player that won, but we don't really know how the match fully should have played out. So we don't really know if that win was deserved in that respect in terms of the game situation. So I think that's quite hard to judge as a player. Like, okay, I might have won or lost because of disconnect, but does that mean my game plan worked or did it not work? So I think these are quite interesting situations where I think both players might be a little bit confused about how they adjust, because I think it's still a little bit unclear who wins. Because, like we said, one player had the Pokemon advantage, but the other one still had Dynamax left. So I'm really interested to see the adjustments come out, because I don't know if either of us can really say if one was doing something right and the other one was doing something wrong.
Very true, right? Incredibly, incredibly true and incredibly important to pay attention to. You could say, well, my game plan was then to move Incineroar in and out 3 more times and consistently make this Zacian physically useless, but that's all well and good, but then what if there's a critical hit? Or what if there's just, a critical hit with a hailstorm and then the hail damage knocks your partner out and then it's just Groudon who comes in and gets Max Geyser. It does, assumptions aside, right? It becomes a little bit different of a game plan because, moving into that next game, do you feel like Emanuele goes for something like a harder Trick Room, but instead leading those dual restricteds of Lunala and Groudon finally making an appearance at the start of game 2, and Thundurus and Amoonguss, so an interesting swap up here with that Thundurus on the field.
Yeah, quite the switch up in many ways. We see the Groudon come out, which didn't even make an appearance in the first game. And then Gabriel also bringing the Thundurus that we didn't see anything of, and same with the Amoonguss, so quite a drastic switch up from both players. We also saw that Emanuele actually won the first game.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, like they had the advantage going to the second game. So I think it's quite interesting that they brought the Groudon, from turn 1, even though they technically won without not even bringing it at all in the first game. So really interesting adjustment. I might see them switching out the Groudon immediately, fearing a Kyogre switch in and a max Airstream from Gabriel, because then I think the Groudon just in a terrible position, having to face down a Kyogre in rain. No Groudon ever wants to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you have the opportunity to go for a Dynamax, but when you're on the opposite side of the field of what is most likely a Thundurus Dynamaxing with Defiant typically being the ability there, if you're Emanuele, you don't want to be bringing in your Incineroar. You don't want to give this thing boosts early at the start of the game before it can consistently also boost up the Pokemon on its side of the field. Those boosts tend to become almost exponential when you build them up for both you and your partner. And no switch here, max Airstream from the Thundurus into that Groudon, does just under 50% of its HP, but does boost the speed of that Amoonguss and of the Thundurus on the opposite side of the field. Thundurus already was the fastest Pokemon moving so far, and does reveal that Life Orb as well. Amoonguss, now that it's faster, can go for this Spore onto the Lunala. Lunala now being put to sleep. Whether it was going for something like a Trick Room this turn as well, not gonna find out, thanks to that Spore from the Amoonguss doing the really pesky stuff it's used to. Heat Crash from the Groudon in the sun, targeting into this Amoonguss, does enough damage to bring it down to its Focus Sash, actually showing that that is the item, not something like that Aka Berry. So, things get a little interesting next turn.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much happening with the, the different leads and different Pokemon being brought in that I just don't think we had enough time in the first turn to talk about it, but I thought it was so interesting that Gabriel brought the Thundurus and the Amoonguss, because, yeah, like we talked about, Emanuele might have wanted to switch out the Groudon for the Kyogre, to anticipate the Kyogre coming for Gabriel. But on the other hand, Gabriel has the opportunity to just, spore a Pokemon on Emanuele's end, especially if it has the Focus Sash item. So, Emanuele just didn't have that easy option to switch out the Groudon, and, kept it in anticipation of knocking out the Amoonguss before it had the opportunity to get Spore off. But thanks to what we call the Turbo Shroom, it was faster than both the Lunala and the Groudon, getting the Spore off thanks to the max Airstream before either of them can move. And now I think it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, the Groudon here switching out for the Charizard, Kyogre switching out to allow that Amoonguss maybe to get a little bit more of that Regenerator HP. Max Airstream into the Lunala, continuing to boost the speeds on both sides, but most importantly, does break that Shadow Shield, forcing this Lunala into what is going to be a pretty dicey situation. Lunala taking another turn of sleep as well. No first turn wake up right there for it. It's almost interesting to me, right? Because you see those Focus Sash Amoonguss and you have to wonder if they're running a max speed Amoonguss.
Yeah, I mean, just given how these legendary Pokemon have, pretty decent speeds, despite, even if the trainer doesn't decide to train them in that speed stat, should be pretty fast. So I believe this Amoonguss probably has a lot of, training in the speed stat, especially if it has a Focus Sash item. Probably doesn't need to invest that much into this bulk if you're just relying on that Focus Sash for its longevity. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty, heads-up play from Emanuele, switching out the Groudon, anticipating Gabriel to not really go for a second Spore, bring out the Kyogre so that it can go for really fast Water Spout the following turn. And could have been really rewarded for that if the Lunala had woken up on the first turn, possible to go for that Trick Room, but wasn't able to do that, and now I think it's really tricky. Emanuele brings out that Groudon to hopefully survive this onslaught coming out from Kyogre and Thundurus thanks to the sun coming up, but if Gabriel decides to focus down that Lunala, might be pretty hard, but we see that Lunala actually go for a Dynamax, which is quite risky for a Pokemon that is asleep and is not guaranteed to wake up the next turn. So I think this is a pretty high risk, high reward play from Emanuele, and I'm really excited to see if it works out for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to make the assumption that if you're taking a pretty quick full HP Water Spout from a Kyogre and you want to have your Pokemon hang on there, your best opportunity is to go for that Dynamax. Even if you're taking another Max Airstream, now it might be a little dicier, right? Even with the Sun up, getting another speed boost as well for this Thundurus. It spent all 3 of its turns just consistently boosting its speed and becoming an absolute menace. Water Spout full HP Kyogre, though, in the Sun, not enough to get a knockout on either of the Pokemon. Lunala does wake up this turn and is able to go for the max Rockfall, get that super effective damage onto that Thundurus. Does once again change the weather. It is not enough to get the knockout, but this chip damage as well as some Life Orb damage on the next turn may be enough to get that full knockout, as this Thundurus has now ended its Dynamax turns and Lunala still has 2 more to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think Emanuele definitely, rewarded for going for that high risk, high reward play of maxing out a sleeping Pokemon, but I think actually this, this dance turn is actually more favoring Gabriel, right? Because this Kyogre, not in Sun anymore. Yes, it doesn't have the rain to give the 50% boost to the Water Spouts, but now the 50% decrease in output from the rain is gone. From the Sun is gone. So this Kyogre is able to just dish out really fast, Water Spouts without being hindered by the Sun. And as we see here, I think Emanuele just needs to sacrifice this Incineroar to position the Groudon better. And this Lunala, since it's in Dynamax form, isn't able to go for any potential wide guards to stave off the Water Spout. So definitely not in the best position. Totally makes sense for it to go for the wide guard here and sacrifice the Incineroar.
Yeah, that Max Guard stopping this Wild Charge from the Thundurus. Kyogre going for the Water Spout this turn, only going to hit into that Incineroar. Incineroar did switch in and activated that Defiant boost. Is going to get the knockout as well from that Water Spout. That Defiant boost, though, not even mattering when you know that this Life Orb Thundurus is going to go down thanks to the sand. Actually, it does not. It hangs on with 2 HP. So a pretty tough thing. You may have almost wanted the Wild Charge to target into your Incineroar and get this Thundurus off of the field before you have to send in something that has to fight off a +3 speed boosted Thundurus.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Pokemon compared to maybe other games is that you don't really get to see the exact HP amount that the opponent has left. So maybe Emanuele just had some wishful thinking of like, okay, I'm just going to stall this one last turn with the Max Guard and let the Thundurus faint from the Sandstorm, because I think it's about to get knocked out based on, him seeing this HP bar. But luckily for Gabriel, survives with 2 HP, and that means it's probably going to be able to get at least one more attack off before it goes down to the Sandstorm. And yeah, I think Gabriel just isn't changing in its commanding position.
Yeah, and you send in Charizard, right? Charizard having to go for the Protect here, which makes a lot of sense. If you're trying to at least just draw out something like, oh, you get the double Max Guard as well, so that is actually really great for the Lunala. Trying to draw out something like the Wild Charge, at least into a protected slot. Kyogre going for Water Spout as well. At least you're racking up a little bit of chip damage as well onto this Kyogre. But one thing that's interesting to me, right, is you brought this Charizard, and Charizard doesn't love coming to games where it cannot Dynamax, because it's really its most useful in that state. And it's in a tough spot because it's still facing down a Kyogre on the opposite side of the field. Lunala, though, I believe only one more turn of Dynamax, and it's going to have to make the most of it because it's going to be the only offensive turn it's going to get.
I believe actually it's probably going to end this Dynamax this turn since it used Max Rock Ball in the first turn.
Oh, right, thank you.
And just succeeded in the double Max Guard. But yeah, I mean, this might be a chance for Emanuele if he has access to the Wide Guard. A Pokemon that, that has used Wide Guard in, previous formats, but not that popular in this one, so a little bit doubtful if it has access to it. But if it does, then this Zacian's not going to be able to knock out this Charizard in one hit, thanks to its very advantageous typing to the Fairy and Steel types of Zacian. So if it can go for a Wide Guard and a Heat Wave, for example, might be able to get himself back into the game. But I think that just depends on if Emanuele has that niche pick on that Lunala. Otherwise, I think this fast Water Spout and Behemoth Blade will just be able to catch things up. But we see the Wide Guard, which is super important, and we'll see if this is able to catch Gabriel off guard, which he does with the Water Spout hitting right into the Wide Guard.
Yeah, that is going to be huge information that Emanuele was able to hide until now. Behemoth Blade from this Zacian is going to target down into that Charizard slot. does do a pretty decent chunk of damage because it's not in Dynamax, but you almost wonder if you should have targeted into the Lunala. Hurricane, though, does not connect due to this Sandstorm into the Kyogre, maybe trying to fish for some sort of confusion here. Charizard as well. Like you said, I almost feel like the Heat Wave may have been the more advantageous of moves.
Yeah, I mean, if it has access to Blast Burn, it's possible that, you know, they wanted more coverage with a, you know, ground-type move, a grass-type move, something like that. So maybe it could have been helped, but maybe at least going for the knockout on the Zacian could have been better. I'm not sure, but I'm just so hyped to see the wide guard coming out from Emanuele's side. I mean, it was the exact move he needed to at least survive another turn, but yeah, unfortunately, it didn't really work out for him here. He just wanted to go for the, you know, the not having access to the Heat Wave or something, just wanted to go for the confusion. You know, as narrow of a win condition as it is, he recognizes that if the Kyogre is able to, you know, hit itself in confusion the following turn, then he might be able to take this game. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and now even a Wide Guard won't be able to help him because this Charizard will go down to a Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, Charizard protecting this turn to prevent that. Another Wide Guard as well from the Lunala. Looking like maybe you're just trying to stave off dealing with this Kyogre, but it can switch its moves. It goes for that Ice Beam instead. Easy enough to knock this Lunala out of the game, and it's going to mean that you're going to have to switch in another Pokemon later on. Behemoth Blade going into that protected Charizard, not going to do any damage though. Sandstorm has now ended as well. Does at least give Emanuele the chance to send in something else if need be, but he's still moving slower than this Kyogre, who was able to take advantage of those speed boosts from earlier in the game, and this Groudon is not looking like it's sitting too healthy here on this field, even with the sun up.
Yeah, I mean, as much as Kyogre doesn't like being in the sun, I think it is very happy to splash about in this, you know, this desert if it's able to face down two Pokemon that are at such low health. So I think, you know, Gabriel's going to be able to take this one pretty comfortably. And yeah, I'd say, you know, definitely Gabriel has the advantage going into Game 3 with the information side of things. I think the Wide Guard, a, you know, pretty unconventional move for Lunala in this current format. Being able to see that is really advantageous for him, but I think it was also nice that because he used that Wide Guard, it kind of forced Gabriel to use the Ice Beam, which is, you know, not a move that's on every Kyogre necessarily, because, you know, if you want Protect, that means you can't have Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, and Thunder. You need to cut something. So, you know, knowing that he has access to that is pretty big information for him as well. So it's not like he came out of this match with nothing. He definitely has something to go into with Game 3 as well, but I think we're probably going to see even more adjustments going to Game 3, which I can't even imagine because the adjustment for Game 2 was just so absurd for both ends.
Yeah, I think the main adjustment I can see from Emanuele's side is not bringing the Charizard and bringing that Venusaur again, because Venusaur was so disruptive to allow that Kyogre to come onto the field. Without that Venusaur, you know, when Gabriel was able to see that Charizard was the Pokemon, he's like, cool, my Kyogre could come in and just kind of sit around, right? There's no way that you can really deal with it. Also, Dynamaxing the Lunala, which while it made sense in that turn and was really pivotal to getting that Thundurus off the field, it then just had to kind of sit around and deal with the Pokemon on the opposite side without getting as much offensive pressure off, whereas I feel Venusaur, or even if you're bringing that Charizard, that should be the Pokemon that you should be prioritizing your Dynamax for, and using it on the Lunala and only getting one turn of offensive pressure does almost feel like you're not making the most of those three all-important Dynamax turns. So while I love the Thundurus change, and I think that it's really good because it helps deal with either the Venusaur or with the Charizard, depending on which one they bring in, I think you still may need to prioritize bringing that Venusaur and maybe giving it that Sun Boost and that speed before that Thundurus can start racking up max airstreams.
Yeah, totally. I think the Thundurus over from you know, Gabriel's end was to adjust for the Venusaur that might come out from Emanuele's end, which makes a showing in turn 1 of Game 3, just as you had predicted. So really excited to see that the, you know, hardest Kyogre counter on Emanuele's team finally comes out again in Game 3, but I don't think he's in a necessarily great position. I think the Gabriel led like this in Game 2 as well to sort of respect the Venusaur coming out in turn 1 again for Emanuele's end. I think, you know, with the Amoonguss being the slowest Pokemon presumably on the field here, if he switches it out for Kyogre, and let's say the Lunala switches out for a Groudon to give Venusaur a speed boost, since Amoonguss is the one that's switching out last, it will be the one to, you know, Kyogre will be the one to get the weather in that first turn. So, you know, I think Gabriel will be able to go safely for a max airstream on the Venusaur before it's able to go for Sleep Powder or Vine Lash or something like that. So I think, you know, Emanuele has to be pretty careful in bringing out the Groudon, which, yeah, we see he's not able to do here and goes for an Incineroar instead.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting to me, right, is this Amoonguss on Gabriel's side means that he may have left his own Incineroar at home. And by leaving the Incineroar at home, it means that the Lunala is a little bit more comfortable, right? You may not be dealing with something like a Throat Chop or a Darkest Lariat, and you're not dealing with those parting shots that were being thrown around all of Game 1. Thundurus, though, protecting this turn, trying to not take a Sleep Powder from this Venusaur that did target into that slot, but no switch, which is really interesting call. There is a Safety Goggles on that Incineroar on the opposite side of the field, which finding out Game 3 is a tough time to find out, as it means that Amoonguss cannot go for really any of its main moves here.
Yeah, and I think that was just a great play from both ends, Emanuele respecting, you know, the Amoonguss to potentially Spore, so even that defensive pivot brings something that has Safety Goggles, but I think Gabriel might have come out on top of this one because, you know, he didn't take the bait and bring out the Kyogre in the first turn, you know, just went straight for the Protect, a little bit more passive move so that he can delay his Dynamax like this. And yeah, now I'm interested to see, you know, does the Venusaur go for the Dynamax? Does it go for the Sleep Powder? Does Gabriel switch out for the Kyogre so that the Venusaur definitely can't move for the Thundurus? I don't think we saw any switches come out, so we're not going to see either of the Generation 3 legendary Pokemon make the appearance. And we see the Airstream go straight into the Venusaur. Is it going to be able to survive?
Yeah, it looks like it is holding that Focus Sash as that item, and this may be the one shot that Emanuele has, right, to get this Sleep Powder off. The Amoonguss on the opposite side of the field will actually, there's a chance it may move faster thanks to that speed boost, and it is not. The Venusaur getting that Sleep Powder off onto the Thundurus first, so I was worried that maybe a Pollen Puff might have gotten that knockout. However, Amoonguss going for the Pollen Puff now into that Venusaur. Thanks to that speed boost, it still was moving a little bit slower, gets that last bit of HP, but that may actually work into Emanuele's favor. Incineroar going for the Flare Blitz into the Amoonguss slot here, just to get off a bunch of damage, bring it down to that Focus Sash. This at least does give Emanuele a nice opportunity, right? Because he has this free switch into a Pokemon that may want to Dynamax, be it that Lunala with something like a Max Rockfall, into that Thundurus slot on the opposite side, and maybe just get rid of it before it can start really racking up damage.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the term, it just seemed like Gabriel was just in the absolute driving seat, being able to attack the Venusaur before it's able to, you know, attack. Guaranteed thanks to having the, you know, Amoonguss and Kyogre positioned the way we talked about earlier, but thanks to that Focus Sash item on the Venusaur, also being able to be faster than the Amoonguss with a speed boost for the Max Airstream, and connecting the Sleep Powders, all those things just aligned for Emanuele, and now, you know, the Thundurus being boosted up with the Defiant just can't do anything right now because it's asleep. So yeah, now Emanuele just in a perfect position to fire off a Meteor Beam into the Thundurus and just get himself back into the game. So just incredibly well played turn from him, just really using every single facet of this team, both how he trains his Pokemon and the items that he gives it.
Lucas goes for a Protect this turn. Thundurus does take that turn of sleep. There is no Dynamax, so this Meteor Beam, while a great option to boost that special attack, can be a little bit risky here because it still, again, has the opportunity to miss, whereas something like a Max Rockfall would not have the opportunity. Power Herb, though, going to be boosting it up in one turn, and it does connect onto this Thundurus, and it is not enough to get the knockout, actually. But the Throat Chop from the Incineroar should be enough to finish that off, removing the biggest threat on the field, getting those Max Airstreams to stop being such a problem. So Amoonguss is still moving pretty slowly here as well, and allowing for Emanuele to maybe go for a Dynamax with an already boosted special attack.
Yeah, I mean, wow, what a turn for Emanuele, just perfectly predicting that Amoonguss to, you know, go for a passive play and Protect instead of Rage Powder, right? Like, if he had gone for the Rage Powder that turn instead, you know, maybe Gabriel could have been bailed out in the following turn if the Thundurus could, you know, move fast enough, wake up fast enough, because it's still in a prime position of Dynamax and being able to, you know, boost the Kyogre's speed, and, you know, still fight through the lost turns from the sleep, but just excellent read from Emanuele, just predicting Gabriel to want to preserve his Amoonguss more, and yeah, just being totally punished for it. And now I think, you know, Emanuele can take advantage of this position and, you know, Dynamax the Lunala that has upped its special attack, and yeah, really excited to see how it goes from here.
Yeah, and this Lunala's in a really nice position, thanks to that Shadow Shield. You can also still send in that Groudon, get the Sun back up, allow this Incineroar to maybe come in later when the Zacian is put onto the field. The Amoonguss at this point, if it switches out, it will get a little bit of that HP back from its regenerator. However, Lunala opting to go for the Wide Guard this turn does make a lot of sense. Amoonguss going for the Spore, though, into that Lunala will connect because it is still moving faster than that Incineroar and faster than its partner Pokemon Kyogre on the field. Kyogre getting that Water Spout, not going to hit either of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field thanks to that Wide Guard put up by the Lunala, but the Flare Blitz from this Incineroar into that Amoonguss will at least get that off of the field and will force Gabriel down to his last 2 Pokemon here, so then you're pretty free to kind of move around, change the weather if need be, get some more Intimidates off a little bit later in the game.
Yeah, I mean, that was just excellently played by Emanuele. You know, really respecting that the Amoonguss is probably still faster than either of his Pokemon and can't really commit to Dynamax just yet. You know, goes for the Wide Guard to make sure that the Kyogre isn't knocking out either Pokemon. You know, Kyogre not known to have single targeting water-type attacks, so keeping the Incineroar safe and being able to knock out the Amoonguss before it's able to spread any more spores. And now I think, you know, I think Emanuele is just a little bit more repositioning away from having a good Dynamax candidate come out and being able to, you know, take care of both the Zacian and Kyogre from Gabriel's end.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Gabriel, right, this may be the turn that you have to go for the Dynamax, because if the Groudon switches in, you still have a pretty free Max Geyser into really any Pokemon on that left slot for Emanuele with the Max Geyser, even if the Sun is up, right? Because then you're still doing what is going to be super effective damage and what is going to reset the rain, as it were. And with Incineroar switching out now to kind of reset the possibility of Intimidate onto that Zacian slot with an extra fake out opportunity, it does make a lot of sense, but it does still leave that slot free. So even though you won't be doing as much damage thanks to the Sun, any damage is still pretty helpful consistently along with moving that weather. However, no Dynamax this turn. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian into that Groudon slot, not into the Lunala. It does well over 50% of its HP and is going to make that Groudon a little bit less comfortable even with this Water Spout. Water Spout, though, not enough to knock the Groudon out, does break the Shadow Shield on the Lunala, and that means that this Groudon is not going to be too comfortable. You may just have to force the knockout here, or switch in your Incineroar and maybe have that get knocked out as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely still not over exactly. I think Emanuele still has access to Dynamax, whereas Gabriel just kind of blew down the Thundurus that got sleep powered immediately. But yeah, right, I think he might have to still you know, commit to a Dynamax on the Lunala, kind of like you know, earlier in the game. You know, just commit the Dynamax to the Lunala that's still asleep, because the Groudon's certainly not a great candidate anymore, and the Incineroar might still you know, struggle against the Kyogre despite being in the sun. So I'm really curious to see how Emanuele decides to kind of you know, tackle this end game here. We see the Groudon switching out for the Incineroar, probably indicating that you know, the Dynamax is probably going to be on the Lunala because this Incineroar is about to take a whole lot of damage.
Yeah, the Dynamax to Thundurus, I completely slipped my mind because it happened, but feels like a while ago with all of these turns moving around.
Absolutely.
It's such a positional game. Behemoth Blade, though, from the Zacian into that Lunala, who still has not Dynamaxed, is not enough to bring it down even into the bottom 25% of its HP. Kyogre going for that Water Spout as well this turn. Does not get the knockout on either of these Pokemon, thanks to the Sun most especially. Lunala does wake up this turn, which is I'm sure what they were looking for, and gets that Trick Room off, which is going to be a great way for Emanuele to handle kind of the end game here, allow possibly for a Dynamax just to do some damage. All of your Pokemon are at pretty low HP, though, if you are Emanuele.
Yeah, I mean, that was, man, Emanuele just really going for these gambles in these matches and really paying out for him right here, especially, you know, if I'm not counting my sleep turns incorrectly, I think he still had one more turn where it could have been asleep, could have woken up, but the Lunala is really self-aware, knows that it needs to wake up this turn or else, you know, Emanuele doesn't have any more Dynamax candidates, won't be able to be faster than either of Gabriel's Pokemon, but wakes up, gets the Trick Room up, and like you said, I don't think Emanuele needs a Pokemon with, you know, high HP to go for the Dynamax. If they're all faster under Trick Room against both the Zacian and the Kyogre, then, you know, you're just going to go for the Dynamax, not for the extra bulk, but for the extra damage output. You guarantee that you're going to get the knockouts on these Pokemon. So, yeah, with that said, we see Lunala go for the Dynamax. And, yeah, I think Gabriel is just going to have to get pretty lucky with double protects if he wants to get through this onslaught from Emanuele.
Yeah, my first thought was maybe seeing the maxed Incineroar. No protects though here, not even from that Zacian. Kyogre does flinch. Actually interesting to see that it was moving next in the Trick Room order, but it takes a max Phantasm in retaliation into that Kyogre slot, lowering the defense of both of these Pokemon, which could be nice for the Groudon that wants to come in afterwards. Zacian going for the Sacred Sword into the Incineroar at least gets that threat off of the field, but still leaves this Lunala, right? I almost was expecting to see a maxed Incineroar go for something like a max Flare just to consistently keep up with the weather, but I think you almost had a good option with either one of your Pokemon. Groudon being the last Pokemon to come in, this is going to kind of be the end of the weather, right? The sun, I don't think, has too much longer to sit around.
Yeah, man, I think my counting has been a little bit off. I haven't really kept track, but we see 2 more turns of Harsh Sunlight, so 2 more turns of really, boosted fire type attacks to get that extra damage on the Zacian. I think one interesting point is that the Lunala wants to have max Phantasm, so the Zacian has, 1 stage of defense going down, and that Heat Crash is a move that is dependent on the opposing Pokemon's weight relative to yours. And Zacian, as it looks, is a pretty heavy Pokemon, so the Heat Crash doesn't do as much damage as a Fire Punch, for example, but Emanuele deciding that the accuracy doesn't matter, we're just going to go for Precipice Blades, hit both, and just bring Italy to a 5-0 victory.
Absolutely insane when Precipice Blades double connects. That defense drop was definitely important, I think, from Emanuele's side, and a really nice way for him to wrap up that game. You're crossing your fingers, right? When you have 3 Pokemon that are under 15% of their full HP, and you're against 2 full HP restricteds, you don't always think of yourself as being in exactly the best position or the best set of circumstances, but it's great to see that Emanuele still played to what was a pretty understandable out, so long as his Lunala woke up and it handled all of those attacks, and it still got Trick Room up, right? Like you're going for a move that has the lowest priority with a Pokemon that's still most likely going to take 2 attacks because it can't wide guard. So, really impressive to see kind of the confidence that he had in his Pokemon on his team to get that job done and to wake up when it was most important.
Yeah, I mean, the most self-aware Lunala just waking up as it Dynamaxes, as it goes to the Trick Room. Like, it was definitely the MVP of that match, getting Emanuele that victory. Yeah, I mean, I think, he had the advantage at the very end, I believe, when he had 3 Pokemon versus, 2 over from Gabriel's end, and were relatively good health, and they just kept taking some damage. And I was thinking, okay, like, how is he going to win with this, not having really good Pokemon to Dynamax, but if the Lunala is going to wake up in Trick Room, then you don't really care about bulk if they're just going to be faster. So, excellent game. I mean, yeah, a little bit unfortunate to see the disconnect happen in a game that was, really down to the wire. Still didn't really know how it was going to end, but I think the game 2 and game 3 just more than made up for it. Both players just adapting so well, reading each other just left and right. It was just such a treat to watch.
Yeah, those are really interesting games, very dynamic, honestly, and also the fact that those Pokemon were kind of it was a very position heavy game, and to me that even though that can be it can be a little bit tough to follow sometimes, that's the most mentally interesting Pokemon for me to watch is when they're so position heavy, because a player's not switching his Incineroar in and out every other turn for fun. He's thinking 4 or 5 turns down the line. It's not, you don't always do that saying, oh, this is fun, I'm just going to keep getting Intimidates off. It's like, no, I'm going to get an Intimidate off, and next time, when I can Parting Shot, if the Zacian's still on the field, then it's going to have to switch and maybe force that Kyogre out. So either way, I love seeing games like that where they are so position heavy, and it really just shows off the caliber of the players who are playing against each other and the mental gymnastics that they can kind of jump through and loop through a little bit to bring themselves into a winning and favorable end game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like your point about how, players don't really switch an instant or in and out for fun. I mean, I'm thinking about the times when I'm just playing, Ruby and Sapphire, for example, and like when I'm playing against the CPUs, I'm not switching my Pokemon in and out. I just want to attack, attack, attack. That's just how it gets done fast. So inherently, it's like, pivoting the Pokemon around, you really aren't doing it for fun by definition. You're doing it because it puts you in a better position. You're going to have less damage that turn, but it puts you into, a more favorable board position, and that's the most important part. So yeah, Incineroar, a great Pokemon to do that with because of its great typing and bulk. And we just really see these 2 players just exemplify like how do you use Incineroar so effectively. So yeah, just like you said, just such an excellent match in so many regards, like just the position-based nature of it. But I think, yeah, we're going to come up with even more interesting matches moving forward. We're going to have France versus China come up next. And yeah, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.